Welcome to the Mythic Life podcast. I'm your host, Eric Brumett, and today I'm joined by a dear family member of mine and a colleague and incredible person that I have so much love and respect for, Shepha Vainstein. Today, we are going to be diving deep into really finding that sense of purpose inside us and what it is to really create healing in the world through education while healing trauma. So thank you for joining me today, Shepha. I'm
Well,
so
Eric,
excited to have you here.
thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I've known you. We've been friends and family and have had so many different layers to our relationship over the last 15, 16 years now. And it's just so wonderful to have you on here today. Shepha is the co-founder of Regeneration, which launched in 2006 after a visit to educational communities in Israel and the West Bank convinced her of the critical role that education plays in shaping a new future for Israeli and Palestinian children and seeing the need for building interpersonal and intercultural bridges across divides of cynicism and despair. She has a master's in counseling psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute and currently is a California state licensed psychotherapist. She also has attended many theta healing courses all the way up through DNA 3, as well as graduated from Barbara Brennan School of Healing, and she is a practitioner of the way of counsel and has been my teacher of counsel and has been just an absolute visionary of peace and healing. And so I'm really excited to get into this work and know that we want to really hold this place of peace and the power of prayer. And so I just want to open that up of really opening this with this prayer.
So thank you, Eric. There had been a period where I was a opening speaker at the Valley Trauma Center, which worked with sexual assault. And even before I began the class, I would bring in something that brought in a sense of wholeness before we went into the shatteredness. And what we're going to be visiting in this conversation has a lot of brokenness. And so I really want to call on the sacred that is so needed to help support people who have visions for peace and wholeness for the Middle East, and to call on all that we can to connect to the divine guidance of God, Allah, creator of all that is, Adonai, Shekhinah, Great Spirit. Help us to open our hearts, open our minds to your guidance, your wisdom. Help us to still and quiet our minds so that we can receive guidance through your quiet gentleness and love. Amen.
Amen. Ah, thank you for that. That really holds a beautiful space for this, for us to be able to really explore. And this journey into creating this nonprofit Regeneration and the journey it's gone on. I know before you launched it, you were pursuing being a healer, being a psychotherapist, having a practice. And I'm wondering what was it in your life that spoke to you of pursuing that path of healing?
I've always had a relationship to my dreams and have very much appreciated how that through our dreams speak to us much from a deeper place than our ego control. And also, I've had a deep respect for healing work. And I had had a very influential healer working on me and on my children uh, for some years that really gave me an understanding of how real
Mm,
the spiritual world is, and that of how important it is to do the kind of work needed to help focus us in a way that contributes to healing within ourselves, within our relationships, and with our civilization and our planet.
yeah.
So it's a position I feel inside myself that we need to support each other and remind each other of that path and find people who help us do that.
Yeah. And I mean, from my practice and from the work that I do, I've always looked for, as a journey of life, that everything in our life plays a part in kind of funneling us towards purpose, towards like what ends up being our the people call it soul mission, purpose, a sense of like calling inside us. And I know that that begins before this life. It can even be something that we intended before coming in. It plays a part in our relationships. It plays a part in our upbringing of our families, the genetic lines we choose. And like, I know for you, you went on this journey even into your name, like finding your name of Shepha and the meaning that that has. Like, so many pieces are playing a part in this, of this calling. I'd love to explore and hear what this journey has been for you in that way. Like, what
Well, I guess,
parts really do you find fed into the creating of regeneration?
I guess now since you talked about the name, I'm going to have to tell the story a little bit because otherwise people won't understand the reference.
Mm,
Um, but my birth name was Frima Schneerson. And there had been a period in my life where my husband and I went through a very difficult period and we separated. And I had gone to a Jewish women's circle where we were meditating on letters. And the woman across me chose the letter Shin. And when the readings were corresponding to the different letters were shared, and she had shared that that sound for the letter Shin started so many English words like shit and shame and difficult words. And I was thinking to myself, well, what about shining? And she ended up sharing a reading. And in the reading, there were examples of Hebrew words that had the shin letter, and one of them was Shepha. And when I heard that, this light went off inside of me. And I thought, oh, goodness, am I going to do that California thing and change my name? But I also was in such a questioning period that I felt if there was a sound that helped me feel more of my light, then that was a healing sound for me.
mm,
So I adopted the name Shepha, not knowing that it corresponds in basic Hebrew on abundance, but corresponds also in Jewish mystical life. The Shepha is the divine flow of God. And then I found out later also Shepha means healing in Arabic.
mm.
And so I didn't realize that when I stepped into that name, it was really a part of my own destiny work.
Yeah. And was that also a bit of a turning moment of coming back together with your husband?
Yes, when we separated, I was Frima, and when we came back 6 weeks later, I was Shefa, and that was a piece that he had to accept as well.
Yeah.
And I was extremely grateful. We happened to have a highly experienced marriage therapist who really helped to save our marriage, and that my husband was part of the founding of this organization. So, you
Yeah.
know, there are like major karmic turning points in my life that things could have fallen apart, and somehow we found the right healers, the right guidance, the right people to help us refine ourselves enough to be able to support each other in our life work in different ways.
Yeah. And then what ended up first bringing you to Israel on that trip that you got to see this need for?
What happened was that my daughter Sarah, who is your wife,
Okay.
was she was in high school, and we were bringing her as an exchange student to the home of an Israeli Waldorf teacher. And it turned out that this teacher was going into the West Bank and helping a school of Palestinian teachers, high school teachers, in a girls' high school. And they needed books in English, so I found books and sent them to her, to the teacher.
Mm.
And then when we were bringing Sarah, he said, "Do you want to meet the people we were helping?" And I said, and I didn't know what that meant until uh, we were there finding our way into the West Bank in a caravan. And
Mm.
it was really a huge education as far as the beginning of understanding of all of the complicated and heartbreaking dynamics between Israel and what's happening, with the Palestinian territories.
Mm.
It's in the occupation in the West Bank and in Gaza. It's heartbreaking. So, well, out of this, though, and out of this journey was a realization that everyone loves their children, and that education can be a healing force. And so my own children had, received the benefits of that through a holistic education. The approach was Waldorf, but it's, and when you're working holistically, you're trying to educate the whole being of the child, and really appreciating the child's soul journey. And so that began, some of the work of working in the West Bank and doing exposures for Palestinian kindergarten teachers on how to support holistic education for their children.
Wow. So really getting that moment to experience what life was like and the culture there and what was happening, it really activated this in you. And then what happened? What happened in the initial creation of Regeneration?
Um, well, one of the moments of grace that happened in the West Bank was that when I had this particular conversation with the Palestinian leader, my husband was in the room. Everything was so unscripted. And I'm going to talk about light again, I realize. But
Yeah.
there's been a conversation with this Palestinian leader about, I was talking about healing. I was talking about social emotional learning, and talking about education with this Palestinian leader. And he said, "What do I do when my daughter sees tanks coming down the street? What do we do?" And I said to this leader something that changed my life.
Mm.
And it was a pretty chaotic meeting, but when I began to talk to him, it got incredibly quiet in the room. And as I was talking to him, it was like a light began to come into the room. And I said to this leader, I said, "Children can't learn when they don't feel safe. But there
Mm.
is an education that produces such safety in the classroom that when the parents take their children there, the parents don't want to leave the classroom either. And it's called Waldorf education." And the longing to feel from all of those fathers in that room for their children to feel safe, that was so palpable. And at first I thought I was hallucinating when the light was coming in the room. And then I looked at this German fellow who had been a liaison with us, and his light was coming out of his eyes. And I realized that this was a real moment. And so it was actually a collaboration between Israeli teachers and Palestinian teachers in trying to help create more healing environments for children. And with that, we also supported Jewish Arab Waldorf kindergartens in Israel, the first one and subsequent ones that have developed from there.
Wow. That is such a powerful moment. Um, I'm just taken by it, this sense of having this beautiful light and energy. It's like so much of our sense of purpose and work is supported on so many different levels. You shared how you're born Frima Schneerson and you found your way to your name, and that family line of the Schneerson line, like there's so many pieces to this of kind of feeding into coming into this moment. And Sarah going there, is was it an exchange program that brought her
Yeah.
there?
Yes, and eventually that teacher's daughter came and stayed with us as well. So
Yeah.
yes, it was an exchange program. And I always say you can't write the script. I never ever would have guessed. I was, practicing psychotherapist. I had my office going in Los Angeles. And I never ever would have imagined that I would have stumbled into starting Regeneration Education. And but what happened for me was when that opening happened there in Jenin in the West Bank, the therapist inside of me, the one inside of me that is so devoted to healing, felt I couldn't step away, that this had to be addressed. And the needs are so huge. The needs are so huge to bring healing there that I've stayed with it and committed myself to it.
And really working it through with people that are in the middle of it. Like it takes so much skill, as I'm sure all of your training in therapy and the way of counsel, to be able to really hold that space and keep people engaged and involved, when I'm sure at different moments things can really feel like they could just fall apart too.
Well, I
Uh,
feel very much that our job is to support the people in the front lines there. And
yeah.
in the way of counsel, I need to talk about our dear Etaf Awad, who is Regeneration Education's Middle East liaison. And she was really devoted. The way of counsel is a form of a listening circle that came out of Ojai Foundation's work. And Etaf was at the very first training that the Ojai Foundation brought to Israel. And she was the only Muslim Palestinian woman in the room. And yet what happened for Etaf is that she connected to her grandmother's teachings, and the way of what they call diwan in the Arab culture. And so our work has also been, supporting Etaf's work in the way of counsel, which helps bridge is community building. It helps to bring Israelis and Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, Christians together. And it's a way of being able to hear, as Etaf likes to say, an enemy is one whose story hasn't been heard. And so it's to create a space. And Etaf and her colleagues, Ora Hammer, these are people, very seasoned, devoted people who have done a huge amount of work to be able to create those kind of spaces and containers to ultimately, it's about protecting our humanity and cultivating humanity and creating space so that we can receive each other's humanity. And that to me is a bottom line work with it.
And so, with the work that you're doing with regeneration and your experience in all of your training, like, what is your take on how would you define trauma? What is trauma?
There could be a lot of approaches to it, but I think one of the best explanations I've heard is that trauma is a sense of frozenness where it takes one out of being present. And so, when we use the word trigger, that can be, an element of it. And one of the problems with trauma is that when trauma is activated or reactivity is activated, the functionings of the thinking part of the brain, what they call the neocortex, is diminished. And the more reactive parts of the brain based on fear is more activated. So the real tragedy out of decision making is it becomes very limited on finding different creative solutions when one is thinking out of a trauma reactive state.
Yeah. I love that you bring in that sense of freeze, because like it's also a thing of time in that way. Like we think back into our memories and there'll be moments that feel frozen, like they're plucked out of time. And that can be, of course, beautiful moments, but that could also be tragic moments. And, in Theta and from the work that I do, the way that we approach trauma is, of course, working on the mental, emotional belief levels of it and digging and working on beliefs around it, but also working on the energetic and spiritual, that it's almost like part of us gets ripped and left in time. And that's kind of like this element of what PTSD is. And, there's the part that you're sharing of the physiological and form of trauma that happens, if that is physical trauma or if that is spiritual or emotional trauma, environmental trauma. What is happening, I have never really been in a place that has been in such violence, a war zone in this way. And like I've never been to that part of the world, so I really don't know. And I know you've traveled a lot of the world. You've even gone through Germany and been to places that maybe you could speak to that, of like how things do kind of get anchored there. Like, didn't you visit Auschwitz?
You mean the anchoring of trauma? Is that
Yeah.
what you're? Well, I would say Germany has been an incredible example. Just overall, the country of Germany has
Yeah.
been an incredible example of a country that has, I would say, ruthlessly, in some areas, in Berlin, when I went to the Jewish Museum there, they've ruthlessly faced their shadow.
Yeah.
And the whole way that the Marshall Plan worked after World War II, and I think about it after our invasion of Iraq, I think about what's going on now between Israel and Hamas, and I wonder, what kind of redemption could take place on some other, national level or global level, excuse me, because Germany was they in the museum. I remember seeing a little teacup that was the only thing left of a Jewish family there, and that they were honoring that, and they didn't have killed. They had, this family was murdered and the date, and they looked directly at the horrors of what Nazism had done in their country and what had been perpetuated with that, and they actually looked at it unflinching in this museum.
Yeah.
So the whole question of our shadow work is another, whether it's our individual shadow work or collective shadow work. So that's, when you talk about Germany, that's been an example of, to me, I grew up, my father smuggled concentration camp survivors from Marseille into Israel. The Holocaust was very present in our house,
Mm.
and the legacy of the Holocaust. And I would say that's definitely has sensitized me today to the plight of children.
Yeah.
And so the work of being able to meet our shadow is a very important piece of redemption of
Yeah.
in those that inflict trauma and also those that receive trauma. The shadow work is very important as
Yeah.
well.
And this beautiful work of regeneration, since its founding, regeneration has supported 3 intercultural, bilingual, holistic kindergartens in Israel, where Jewish Israelis and Palestinian Israeli families send their children to learn the work of how to live in peace with one another. And until the Ministry of Education fully accredited it and begun financially supporting it, Regeneration also helped establish and support the first Arab Waldorf school in Israel called Tamrat El Zitoun. Did I pronounce that correctly?
I was like, to
Close. Which means in Arabic, the fruit of the olive tree. Additionally, Regeneration has a partner school in the West Bank, House of Hope. This school, inspired by the teachings of Martin Luther King and nonviolence. At the end of this month, you're going to be flying to Jerusalem to participate in Regeneration Education's trauma-informed education training for Jewish, Muslim, and Christian teachers that will be translated and put online for Arabic, Hebrew, and English speakers around the world, including Gaza. And tell me more about this trauma-informed education training.
I thank you for asking. That is the big focus right now.
Yeah.
The background of this particular training, Beatrice Rudeshauser Rahm developed this training 15, 20 years ago. And she was a Waldorf teacher in Switzerland who was very good at identifying what is called first grade readiness, where you evaluate a kindergarten child going into first grade and you see developmentally if they are developmentally ready to go into first grade. So she became very, very perceptive on children's developmental stages. And ultimately, what she learned is that when children are traumatized, they regress developmentally. So when you have a trauma-informed education, this is what she developed, what she called essence of learning. That you look at where the children's developmental markers are, and you see with perhaps they need to have an environment that lets them regress a little bit so that they can take in the healing of the environment. And this could also be through their senses. You know, the children are just one big sense organ. So the idea of movement and feeling and sight, all of this has to be taken into consideration. And so Beatrice developed the essence of learning, and the United Nations selected it as, you know, one of the key programs in trauma-informed education worthy of support. And they helped to teach Beatrice how to develop it so that it's scalable. And one of the things that we're working on now is we're going to be doing this training. The beginning of the training is going to be a two-part training, is to start to train teachers not only how to do essence of learning in their own classrooms, but then train these teachers to teach other teachers. So part of this is we want to help get this exponentially out there, because there's such a dire need. Even before this latest episode, when we talk change and we talk about displaced populations, there are crises areas all over the planet. And so there is a huge need for finding ways to educate children that somehow will help to protect them to some degree. And I'm going to come back again to the idea of protecting children's humanity. And this is at a time when part of the problems of the legacy of trauma is that there's this intergenerational transmission of trauma too. So there is a huge amount of work to try to buffer children so that they can grow in their own potential and have the sense of their own bodily safety and also be able to flourish. And Beatrice's work is, I believe, in the essence of learning, is a very important part of this. And hopefully the dream is to get this filmed, get this edited in Arabic, Hebrew, and English, and get this online so that teachers around the world will have this in access to be able to start implementing some of these. Some of it is very common sense. Some of it is brilliant and easily transmissible. So there is a way of bringing this through. So hopefully we can bring this to the world in a really strong way at the time when it's so needed.
It really is. And, you know, I'm just, I'm in awe of you holding this and,
You watched
and
it, Eric. You've seen it.
watching your, where you hold your courage, you know, just knowing you and having our relationship of like seeing when like there can be a little bit of a fear response that could be like, oh no, a tick, you know, but then it's like, but I'm gonna go to Israel in the middle of, you know, like it's incredible how strong your courage and your calling is. And you know, just watching you pursue this calling, this purpose, it's something that's come through you in so many different ways. It's really beautiful and powerful. And it sounds like such incredible work. I give my full support of this being a huge success. It really is so needed, you know.
And I have to say, I, love uh, your children so much, my little grandchildren.
Yeah,
And I feel so blessed that they are safe and they are loved. And if there's anything I would wish, it's that all children could be receiving what my own grandchildren receive. And this is my way to try to do some of that in a world where there is such a huge need for this for the children.
absolutely, absolutely. And we are Mythic Life, free thinkers, deep feelers, courageous trailblazers. We own our myth with our vibes, how we think, feel, and act. We believe that love is a given, not something earned, that spiritual is sexy, kindness is cool, and earth is sacred, that everybody has superpowers and life is too boring without magic. We walk our talk, and when life gets real, we heal. We choose our path and we make it epic. And, you know, this really is such an epic journey. All of these different stages that regeneration has gone through, what it has supported, what it's created, how you've held it together. You know, there's been moments where it's like, how do we keep this going? And then all of a sudden there's this new life force and support that comes through and a new layer. So it's something that's so beautiful and powerful. And you know, for everybody listening to this episode, to learn more about regeneration, you can visit regenerationeducation.org. There is going to be a link in the description of this episode, and you know, there's a place there to donate, to give support, to keep
Yeah, do you take
this
account
education and healing out there.
that right now we need the financial help to see the training through and get everything online. So our goal is to raise 100,000, and we've raised 35,000 so far. So right now is a great time to get some help for that.
Absolutely. And I just really want to thank you, Shefa, for coming on and sharing this work, and you know, seeing it through. It's so beautiful. And you know, that you really, I I I love how through your dreams and through your intuition, how you've discovered this and continue to muster up that strength and courage to keep it moving. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for letting me share this work with all of your listeners and viewers. I really appreciate the help. Thank you, Eric.
Absolutely. And for everybody out there, if you want to learn more about Mythic Life, you can check us out at mythiclife.com. We have a lot of places where we want to hold this for you all. We have healing circles that are free where we're going to just hold this place of healing. You know, the power of prayer is powerful. It really is. And, you know, sending that prayer and light to places that really need to be held, you know, as what I've really heard from you today, Shefa, is holding a place for what feels unsafe to be shattered, to let it kind of like be held. And that's what prayer can do as well. And you know, so check out regenerationeducation.org, donate what you can, and hold a prayer for peace. And thank you so much for joining today.